Hey YouTube, today I'm going to be making a video on objective morality. I've made two videos on this in the past, and I've come across many of the same comments and questions through private message in the comment section. So I'm going to take a video and discuss these objections. Now I hope to explain my view of objective morality and clarify the differences between that and subjective morality, as well as discuss empathy and utilitarianism. So if you don't know what all those words mean, don't worry about it. I will explain that before I talk about it. So here's what I'm arguing. If God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. Objective moral values and duties do exist. Therefore, God exists. So what do I mean by objective morality? I mean that there is a standard of morality and that right and wrong exists regardless of whether or not anybody believes it. Right and wrong apply to all people at all times and is not impacted by what I think or believe. Given a specific set of circumstances, a morally significant action is either right or wrong. I am also arguing that without God, this type of morality is impossible. Now let's take a look at what I am not saying. I am not saying that atheists do not have morals. I am not saying that atheists cannot function in society. I am not saying that I have the ability to determine what is right and wrong in any given situation. And I am not making blanket statements like killing is wrong or anger is bad. Under this viewpoint, circumstances do matter, and there could be circumstances which make things like anger and even killing people acceptable, like self-defense, for instance. Now let's look at subjective morality. Now this is the idea that there is no objective standard of morality. What is right for you may not be right for me. An act may be socially inconvenient, but nothing is actually right or wrong. We may have different opinions of morality, but there is no standard of morality, so there is no way to say whether or not anyone is right or anyone is wrong. Morality is effectively an opinion. Now, very few atheists I have talked to actually hold this view of subjective morality, as it seems counterintuitive, and many attempt to argue that there can be objective morality without God. So I'll quickly take a look at some of the reasons why I believe in objective morality, and why I argue morality cannot be objective without God. And I actually think the Declaration of Independence actually sums up my argument quite nicely. It says, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights." Now, we do not know what is right by majority opinion, but rather these things are self-evident. That is to say, it is common sense. And we have some innate knowledge of a realm of objective moral truths through a priori intuition. For example, we deem things like love and generosity and self-sacrifice to be good things, and we deem things like rape and murder to be evil. If God exists, it makes sense that this moral standard was instilled in us, possibly through evolution, and testifies to an actual standard of morality. But without God, this becomes completely arbitrary. It becomes nothing more than the byproduct of socio-biological evolution. It is geared only for survivability and not truth value. It is just an illusion and leftover of pack mentality. Any desire you have to engage in self-sacrificing behavior without a tangible benefit would simply be a misfiring of evolution. Now that being said, here are my problems with subjective morality. Now please note, I am not trying to argue that subjective morality is wrong simply because it is repulsive or negative or has terrible consequences, but because it does not accurately reflect reality. So if morality is subjective, it is nothing more than an opinion. And if it's nothing more than an opinion, why should I accept your opinion of morality? If I were to disagree with you under subjective morality, that wouldn't make your viewpoint wrong, it would just mean we have a different opinion. It would be equivalent to us debating over which flavor of ice cream tastes better. There is no truth when it comes to preferences. Now I argue that morality is not a preference or opinion. And when people like Hitler commit atrocious acts, they are not merely expressing their particular preference or opinion, but are actually wrong. Now, rather than accepting subjective morality, most atheists, at least the ones I've talked to on YouTube, usually try and argue that morality is objective without the need for God. Now many argue that morality is subjective, but becomes objective when society comes to a consensus. And I would have to ask, since when does having a bunch of people believe something make it true? I mean, if that were the case, then I think that would make Christianity true. Unfortunately, that kind of argument is nothing more than an argument ad populum, which is a logical fallacy. Now, if morality is a subjective opinion, how can the opinion of the masses be more true than the opinion of an individual? I mean, if society is the grounds for objective morality, which society is it exactly? And does anyone really believe that if everyone agreed with Hitler, his actions would somehow become moral? Now, I've had several people take a different approach and argue that morality is objective based off of empathy. But to be honest, I don't even think that view makes any sense. But they would say that we ought to use empathy because it will benefit us in the long run. The reason that we are moral is to get some benefit or avoid some consequence. People can argue that society can punish acts like murder, and therefore it would not be in our best interest to commit murder, making murder wrong. But does this reflect reality? I mean, if I find it beneficial for me to randomly kill one of my neighbors and I can get away with it, does that make it right? I mean, does that really make that action morally acceptable? And what if doing something immoral provided a great benefit to me? Would the immoral act suddenly become moral? I think there's a clear distinction here that needs to be made between rationally self-interested behavior and moral behavior. Moral acts are often self-sacrificing and may even be detrimental to my own well-being. However, from a subjective moral standpoint, which is where this viewpoint inevitably leads, if our innate morality is just the evolutionary byproducts of pack mentality that help us survive through hope of reciprocity, then when I realize that I will not receive reciprocity, I have no further incentives to show empathy. Under this viewpoint, empathy is not good in and of itself or of its own right, but it's just an illusion and leftover of evolutionary development. Now, some argue that morality is objective through a viewpoint without God, through a viewpoint known as utilitarianism. And utilitarianism holds that we should do the greatest good for the greatest number of people. Now, one problem you have here is the ambiguous nature of the greatest good. If you value cheap labor for the majority over the suppression of rights for the minority, then you've effectively justified slavery with this system. And many atrocities can be justified under this system. I mean, Hitler genuinely believed he was doing the world a favor by killing millions of Jews. So from his perspective, he was doing the greater good. So were Hitler's actions really wrong, or was he just using a different standard of morality as this system would hold? Now, in the end, this viewpoint is doomed to fail, especially as an objective system, because it attempts to make morality objective based off of subjective value judgments. You can see the problem with that. But another major problem is that you're trying to rationalize, or an attempt to rationalize, why should one do the greatest good for the greatest number of people? As I see it, there are two possible reasons that you should. One could be that it's in your best interest. However, from the utilitarian point of view, that puts the needs of society over your personal benefit, so that's out. And the other possibility is that morality is not an opinion, and things like empathy and self-sacrifice really are good. However, if you say that, then you're borrowing from objective morality and affirming my position that morality is not a preference and that some things really are right or wrong. To say that empathy is fair or good supposes an objective standard of morality exists by which we can say what is fair or unfair. If God did not exist, we'd be unable to make truth claims like that because there'd be no objective standard of right and wrong, but only human preference. So there's basically two rational positions left available. Morality is objective and God exists, or God does not exist and morality is subjective. So let's see which one you hold to. Now, I believe that torturing innocent babies for fun is wrong. If you agree, do you mean it is objectively wrong and nobody should engage in that behavior? Or is it your subjective opinion it is wrong and you merely prefer that people not engage in that behavior? I'm basically asking, is it just your preference or is it really wrong to torture innocent babies for fun? Now, if you think it's really wrong, you're advocating objective morality. And if you're right, you're proving God exists. So remember, God loves you, and so do I.